So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I'm the Assistant Director of Communications there. And I will be not only moderating and facilitating today's Workforce Wednesday webinar, but also presenting as well with my colleague Antonio Gomez. Today, we're going to be talking about speaking clearly, how to avoid jargon, and connecting with your audience and using plain language in any kind of presentations. So, again, my name is Kirsten Bayer, and then my colleague Antonio Gomez is joining us as well. He's a workforce development coordinator for our center. And here is our contact information if you would like to contact us following today's webinar. Couple of housekeeping things before we get started with our beginning polls is that we are on the Zoom webinar platform as opposed to Zoom meeting. So it's more of a presenter format, more of a sit and get format, but we are going to have some opportunities to participate today with some polling as well as typing in the chat. So we do encourage you to do that and to fully participate in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's open for everyone. So now you can type in the chat. If you'd like to say good morning to us, we welcome that. And then if you do have a question or a comment during today's session and you would like to verbally tell us that, we welcome that as well. We would just ask that you raise your virtual hand, your virtual Zoom hand on your Zoom toolbar, and then we can give you your microphone capability back and you can unmute yourself and participate with us that way. But it's a little bit more controlled on our end just so we can get through the content. And then when we have those opportunities for participation and Q&A, we do encourage you to raise your hand if you want to. Good morning, Christine and Cassandra. I believe I'm saying that correctly. I'm sorry if I'm not. Thank you for typing in the chat. I appreciate it. Another housekeeping item is that today is being recorded and we will be offering closed captioning. So you can feel free to turn that on for accessibility reasons or note-taking purposes. The recording from today will be up on Illinois Workforce Academy website, which we have that hyperlinked here for you. And Antonio can put that in the chat as well. If you don't mind, Antonio, just putting our website in the chat. It will up on the website within about 48 business hours. So please allow us that time for editing the video and then getting the slide deck up as well. And then any resources that we provide you today will also be on that website too. Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us in the chat. And then my last housekeeping item is just to do our beginning polls. We do this for every Workforce Wednesday webinar. So if you've joined us before, you're probably familiar with it. I'll go ahead and launch that now. So the first one is just where's your local area at? I sit along with Antonio. We both sit on the WIOA Professional Development Committee along with our director, Amy Julian. And that committee helps to plan the Illinois Workforce Summit, formerly known as the WIOA Summit, as well as all of the Workforce Wednesday webinars all year long and other professional development opportunities regionally across the state. So this poll, we do look at this data on the committee and we just, it allows us to make sure that we're really meeting the system where you all are at and that we are marketing these webinars and this professional development hitting the whole state and the whole system. So I appreciate you answering that poll. Looks like everyone's gone ahead and answered. So we have a good span across the state, which is awesome. I always like to see that. Quite a few people from Southern Illinois, Northern, and Chicago, and then one person from Central. So thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate that. And then the next question is just which partner do you best represent? So if you best represent Title 1, 2, 3, or 4, or if you better represent a other WIOA partner or stakeholder or a state or local workforce innovation board member. Give a second to answer that poll. Thank you for participating. Just a couple more filtering in. Okay. So it looks like we have Title I, Title II, Title IV, and other WIOA partner, and then also one person who's a state or local Workforce Innovation Board member. So thank you for joining us today. Good span across the system as well. All right. So I'm going to just dive into kind of our agenda for today and what we're going to be covering. So we're going to talk about what jargon is. We're going to define it for purposes of this webinar. How do we avoid it? Strategies to avoid it. We're going to talk about the triangle of meaning, which you'll learn about what that is, and just how language affects our everyday life and our presentations in general. And then we're going to focus on two strategies that we can use to help maintain our audience's attention when we're presenting in order to avoid jargon, but still maintain the audience's attention. And then Antonio will be covering using plain language and a whole plain language guide that he took part in creating as well. So to dive right in, just what is jargon? Let's go ahead and define it. So jargon refers to specialized terms, phrases, or language that are used by a specific group, profession, or community. These terms are often not easily understood by people outside of that group, as they are tailored to a particular field or area of expertise. So, for example, medical professionals use terms like hypertension, CPR, myocardial infarction, which may be confusing to someone without a medical background, right? For example, personally, my husband is a firefighter and he's always telling me about all these calls he's going on and they're pushing drugs. You know, he's an EMT paramedic too, and they're doing chest compressions and just talking about all those medical terminology and first responder terminology. And sometimes I'm just like, what's way over my head? You know, I have a communications background and a training background. And so medical terminology is not my forte. So I always have to ask him to just speak in plain language with me. It's a barrier in our communication. I actually teach a communications course at Illinois Central College in Peoria. And I used to teach it at Illinois State. I've also taught it at Richland Community College in Decatur. I've just adjunct taught communications courses, and I have my master's in communications. And the top two barriers to communication, the number one is stereotyping, and number two is actually jargon. So top two barriers are stereotyping and jargon. And then the third is a term called ethnocentrism, which I've covered in a different webinar for a Workforce Wednesday webinar. But jargon is definitely a huge communication barrier to being efficient with our communication because it's just unfamiliar terms. So now that we've defined jargon for this webinar, I want you to tell me what is some of the jargon that is used in your work setting. So I'm actually going to launch a poll and it's going to be like an open text box. It should be. Let me know if it works. And you should be able to name a couple of words that are jargon in your workplace. So, what's some jargon that you use in your day-to-day work life with like your coworkers or your boss? I know for our center, we speak in acronyms. I mean, WIOA, come on, like WIOA, whatever you want to call it. Our center, we speak in acronyms. So a lot of times we'll be dealing with outside vendors or outside clients, or we'll be interviewing for a new position. And our director, Amy, will just be going on and on talking about all of our different projects. And all of our projects have an acronym. So she'll be speaking in acronyms. And I'm like, I always stop her in the middle of her tangent and I'll say, Amy, we need to define what those acronyms mean, you know. OET, Office of Employment and Training, WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, all of those things. So I always think of those terminology, but even just things like when we're referring to a customer in a LWIA, a customer for a workforce is different than a customer at a store, right? So we define things differently. And we're going to talk about language and meaning as well today. But we have 6 people who've participated. Anyone else? If you can't figure out the text box, you can also just type it in the chat if that's easier, whichever works for you. One or two things of words of jargon that are used in your workplace. Here we go. A couple more filtering in. All right. I'm going to end that and should be able to share the results maybe. Oh, it's opening it up in a browser for me. Here we go. I'll share it with all of you. We can see that. Okay. So we have WEOJT. Yeah, like on the job training, right? If you're not in workforce, if someone said OJT, they'd be like, what are you talking about? WIOA, WBL. Yeah. Resource coordination or cultivation, IDHS, EHR, CDPH. I don't even know what CDPH or EHR is. CIE, VR, yep. Youth programming, WIOA trainer provider, all the acronyms, right? CTE, WIOA, EV, yep. EV for sure. Uh, yeah, LWIAs, yeah. It's so fun. I love whenever we hire new people. And Antonio can maybe speak to this because he's newer in our center. He's worked for us for like a year and a half to 2 years now. And learning all the acronyms is just a whole tailspin. We actually have like a short acronym list for our new hires just because there's so many acronyms in workforce. So, okay, back to my slides. Thank you for sharing. So now that you've identified some of the jargon in your workplace, let's talk about why we should eliminate it. Why we should eliminate jargon when we're doing any kind of presentation, speaking to customers, speaking to maybe frontline staff, or just speaking. I mean, it's okay, right? It's we learned about in the definition, if I go back, that jargon can be really useful when we're talking in a specific group or a profession or a community. So when we're talking with workforce professionals and we're in workforce and we're saying jobs like we're saying words like OET and OJT and WIOA and all those acronyms, then it's completely relevant to be speaking in those terms because the people in that specific group, we get it, right? We understand what that means and can actually help us communicate better, hence why we created the acronyms, right? But when we're presenting or when we're talking to a group of individuals that aren't a part of the workforce or are new to the workforce or whatever, maybe we're speaking to a business or an employer, right, who isn't familiar with government terminology. We deal a lot with CBOs and employers. I'm sure all of you do as well. They might not understand what all the acronyms mean, right? So why should we eliminate jargon? One, for clarity and understanding. When you remove jargon from your presentations or your language, when you're dealing with audience members who don't understand those terms, you're ensuring that your message is clear and easily understood by a wider audience. So we want to hit a wider audience. We don't want to eliminate any potential CBOs or employers or potential customers by speaking in that high level technical terminology. We want to hit that wider audience regardless of their background or their expertise. And this is particularly important when we're presenting to a diverse group of people. A lot of our work has infiltrated into more diverse groups of people over the last 5-10 years. So we want to make sure that we're really eliminating jargon from our presentations in order for clarity and understanding, as well as engagement. So using simple, accessible language can help your audience be more engaged. If the audience gets lost in technical terms, then they're going to lose interest or they may struggle to follow your main points and follow along with the information that you're presenting. Also, for inclusivity, not everyone in your audience is going to be familiar with the specialized terms that you might use. So avoiding jargon can make your presentation more inclusive and more accessible. And Antonio is going to touch on that a little bit more. It also ensures that everyone, regardless of their knowledge level, can benefit from what you're saying. It also helps us to avoid miscommunication. So, jargon can lead to misunderstandings, especially if someone interprets a term differently or isn't familiar with its specific meaning. By removing this, you can reduce the chance of having these miscommunications and having these barriers in communication. It can also help to build your credibility or your ethos. I teach a lot on ethos and how there's initial credibility, derived credibility, and terminal credibility that we establish when we're speaking with anyone, any communication encounter. When you meet someone for the first time, your initial credibility is kind of that first impression, right? Your derived credibility is the credibility that you're establishing throughout that communication interaction. So you're establishing credibility throughout that communication or throughout that presentation, that conversation, that email thread, whatever it is. And then the terminal credibility is how credible that person thinks you are after that communication encounter is over. So after that email thread's over, after that presentation is over, after that conversation is over. And so when we eliminate jargon, it can actually help to either terminate or really heighten our credibility depending on our audience, right? So when we're wanting to hit a wider audience, it can help to really build our credibility when we eliminate jargon because we're simplifying our language. It can make us appear more relatable, more approachable, making our audience feel more comfortable to ask questions, and that can help enhance your credibility with your audience. Overuse of jargon might make you seem kind of disconnected or out of touch with your listeners. I think this is especially important when we're dealing with potential customers or students. I see that like Dana's on here from ICCB, and I know that they're working primarily with students and faculty at ICCB and the community college system. And so making sure that we're avoiding that jargon to help build our credibility with students as well, or adult education learners in Title II is really crucial. And then focusing on key messages. When you use jargon, there's a risk that your audience might get caught up in trying to decipher what the complex terms are. There's so many times where I've been on presentations where I didn't understand a word or an acronym and I had to quickly stop listening and Google what it meant or try to figure it out or ask a coworker or text my boss, and say, what does this acronym mean? And so that eliminated me from focusing on the presentation or the information that I was digesting. And I stopped listening, right? And so, in order to decipher what that technical term was, so simplifying your language can help keep that focus where it belongs on the core ideas that you're trying to convey for your audience. So, basically, eliminating jargon can help you ensure that your presentation or your communication with your audience is clear, engaging, inclusive, and accessible to a broader audience, which is what we want to do. Okay, so next we're going to watch a video. Oh, it's not going to play. I embedded it. 1 second. I'll pull it up here. I want us to watch this video about a hashtag and how it is used in this video. It's kind of humorous too, which is always fun. Take a little humorous break. 1 second. Let me find the video link. I apologize, everyone. Okay. Here we go. Hopefully there's not a commercial.
Hey, Justin, what's up?
Not much, Jimmy. Hashtag chilling. What's up with you?
Just been busy working. Hashtag rising. Hashtag is it?
Hey, check it out. I brought you some cookies. Hashtag homemade. Hashtag oatmeal raisin. Hashtag show me the cookie.
Sweet. Hashtag don't mind if I don't. Pretty good. Hashtag getting my cookie on. Hashtag I'm the real cookie monster. Hashtag no.
Delicious, right? Hashtag. Hashtag LOL.
Hashtag classic. By the way, did you catch last week's episode of Duck Dynasty? Hashtag quack quack.
I love
At US Cellular, you don't have to choose.
Oh, the commercials on YouTube. Okay. All right. So that hashtag video, Jimmy Fallon and Justin Timberlake, if you don't know who the people in the video were speaking in hashtags. So what does a hashtag mean to you? When you think of a hashtag, what do you think of? Go ahead and type that in the chat. Dana says, love these two. Antonio Legends, both of them. Yes. But go ahead and type that in the chat. When you think of a hashtag, what does that make you think of? Because we know, like, the next question I have on this slide is, what does hashtag mean in the video? The hashtag that we'll get to that. Okay. You guys are saying awareness, marketing, attention, a way to follow a topic on a conversation. Okay, good. So what did a hashtag mean in the video? Like when Justin and Jimmy Fallon were talking in hashtags, what were they meaning in the video? Dana says a way to share a core idea and feeling, hashtag sustainability, calling attention, pound sign. Also, dot, dot, dot. Yes, sounded like a coded language. Yeah, it did. It was like they were speaking in slang. Yes, Candace, yes. So would it be hard to explain hashtags to someone who doesn't use social media? If so, how? So do you think if you were to explain what a hashtag is to someone who doesn't use social media, would that be difficult and why? Yes, because they're not aware of that language. Yeah. Yes, because they are not aware of what it is. Yes. Yes. Okay. So they were speaking in hashtags. And so it was humorous to those of us who know what a hashtag is in terms of social media. I don't think social media does this as much anymore, but I remember when hashtags first became a thing, it was like you would see Instagram posts or Facebook posts, and people would put like 50 hashtags on their posts, right? Like they would say hashtag tacos, just anything to help the algorithm get their posts noticed on social media. And now I feel like we've kind of in social media strategy tailored back a little bit. And we're trying to be more efficient and strategic about the hashtags. But initially, when hashtags first became a thing, it was just like a free-for-all, right? Cindy, now it's fun to just make fun of hashtags. Yeah. Hashtag Sunday Fun Day, LOL. Yeah, the following tracking by using can be helpful for maintaining momentum on ideas and feelings. I agree with that, Dana. Yes. Love the participation. Thank you guys for participating. Okay, so we know that the word hashtag denotatively or dictionary definition actually means the pound sign. So the number sign. So when we saw hashtag before social media, we would have just thought like a number or number one or the pound sign on a keyboard, right? Now when I think of hashtag, my initial thought is social media, right? Hashtag show me the cookie, like Justin Timberlake said, or hashtag LOL, right? So language changes over time. So that brings me to talk about language. Language is symbolic. It means different things to different people at various times. So again, hashtag to someone who doesn't use social media or maybe someone from an older generation does not mean the same thing as it does in 2025. Language is also arbitrary. We assign meanings to words, but they do not have meaning on their own. So humans assign the meaning to a word. That's why we have slang words in our language or in every language across the world, because we assign meaning to certain words. And language helps to create our reality, and there is a social construct around the words that we're using. This is pertinent to jargon because we assign meaning to the jargon words that we're using. Like, yes, jargon can be high technical terms, but specifically, I'm thinking of like when we speak in acronyms, or we speak of like a customer. Like I said earlier, a customer to Dana isn't going to, at ICCB, isn't going to mean the same thing as a customer to Cindy Lehman, who's on this call, right? A customer in ICCB world might mean more like a student or an adult education learner, or even just a community college in general might be a customer. But when we're talking about like a customer from an Alwea standpoint, it would be someone walking in trying to find a job, right? Going to their local Alwea or their local WorkNet. So we are assigning the meaning to the same word customer, different meanings, right? Same thing with the word hashtag. And there's so many other words in our language. Even the acronyms, right? Like when we're talking to an audience and we say OJT and it's an audience of workforce professionals, they know exactly what we're meaning by OJT, on the job training. But not only do they know what the acronym means, they actually know what on the job training means. And somebody who's not from the field might not have as much awareness of that. So that brings me to talk about the triangle of meaning. So I'm going to use a really simple example. So the triangle of meaning in communication is simply just when we read or listen to or communicate a word, then our brain has a picture of what that word is, and then we have a thought associated with it. And that can be different with each person. So for the word, we'll use the example of dog. So the word is dog. I might think when I see the word dog or I hear the word dog, I picture a dog, right? I actually picture my 3 dogs that I have at home. You might picture your dog or your neighbor's dog or your friend's dog or family dog, whatever. And then the thought might be, oh, I want to pet it. So if I see a dog out walking in, a park or something, and I don't have my dogs with me and I see him, I love dogs. So I think, oh, I want to go up and pet that dog. Someone else, though, they might hear the word dog. They might picture a traumatic instance from their childhood whenever they got attacked by a dog. So they think, oh, I want nothing to do with dogs. I hate dogs. I don't want to be anywhere near that dog because I have this traumatic experience from my background, right? So individuals, not only as a culture and society do we assign meanings to words, and then we assign meanings to words in our workplaces, in our families, right? Like my family has different words that we call each other, like nicknames and things like that. Maybe your friend group has certain words associated with it that you guys always use. But then also just like individually, certain words mean something different to me than they do to all of you. And so we all have this kind of triangle of meaning in our brains. And when we hear or see or read a certain word, we have a picture of it, and then we have a thought associated with it. So the picture is actually the referent. So what our mind pictures is called the referent. And then our thought is what that word and referent convey in our brains, is that thought. So the triangle of meaning, when we're talking about language, there's a denotative dictionary meaning of language, and then there's a connotative meaning of language. So for example, let's take the word lame. So the denotative dictionary definition of the word lame is someone who's physically crippled, especially in the foot or the leg. But the connotative meaning, or the Urban Dictionary, or basically what society has given meaning to this word as, is maybe boring or out of touch, right? So if you called someone lame. Another slang word is lit. So denotatively, dictionary, lit means to set on fire. But if maybe you use the word lit, or you have children, or have heard maybe some of your customers or students use the word lit, connotatively, it can mean fun or party, or like something is like these flaming hot Cheetos are lit, they're good. And then similarly, the word fire is also a similar example. So denotatively, it means a process of combustion, a destructive burning, but connotatively, it means like something's cool or good or awesome, right? Like this is fire. So these are slang language terms. And so slang can also be jargon, right? Acronyms can be jargon, abbreviations can be jargon, high technical terms can be jargon. So all of these things, if we're not defining them for our audience, can infiltrate into our presentations and create that communication barrier. So these are definitions of words, but also the meaning that we give words can change over time. It can change from culture to culture. It can change between languages. It can change between generations. And so I know like the terms that my students use when I'm teaching them in my classroom are things I've never heard of. And so maybe you feel that way too. Let me know in the chat if you do, or any other examples that you guys can think of. Let's see what's in the chat. Christine says, my 9-year-old says, let's play tic-tac-toe. Does she actually mean play tic-tac-toe? Or is that like a different meaning, Christine? Or any other words that you guys can think of that are the dictionary definition is different than the connotative definition in culture? Goat, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, greatest of all time, right? It's an acronym, but we call it the GOAT. Yeah, that's a great one, Chelsea. Oh, Christine, sorry, that was in reference to the hashtag. I'm sorry. Oh, when your 9-year-old sees the hashtag, she says, "Let's play tic-tac-toe." Oh, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Crash out. What does crash out mean connotatively?
Crash out means somebody is like losing it publicly. Like they're
Antonio knows he's up with the times, you guys.
Antonio watches too much TikTok.
Drip, flex, which means to brag. Yeah, bet is another one. Fall out and have a meltdown. Okay. I remember when my dentist asked me why were people calling Mike Jordan the GOAT. Yeah. So it's like culture and society creates these words and acronyms and things, and these are all jargon, right? Yes, he is Michael Jordan, greatest of all time. The OG, yeah, OG, yeah, original. Absolutely. That's an abbreviation, right? But okay, good, good. So all of these things are jargon, right? And they can all foreign to me. Maybe it's time for me to retire. Christine, no, you can learn all the words, but we need to avoid them anyways in our presentations or when we're speaking to our customers. Good. Okay, so all of those words, the connotative definition of dictionary definition words can be different too. And so when we say like, when we say someone's the OG, someone like Christy isn't going to know what we're talking about. So we have to either avoid that jargon or explain it explicitly. So here are some strategies to avoid jargon. So avoiding jargon in any kind of speech or presentation or just formal kind of communication can help ensure that your message is clear and accessible to a wider audience. So here are some strategies to do that. First of all, you have to know your audience, right? That's like 101. So you can tailor your language to the people that you're speaking to. That way, if you are speaking to like your direct team or direct supervisor, they're going to know what those acronyms mean and you can use them. But if you're addressing a wider audience, then maybe you want to avoid them. So knowing your audience is crucial. And so you can, if you're addressing a general audience, you can avoid using those technical terms unless you explain them. And if your audience is more specialized, then you can use some of the jargon, as long as it's relevant and understandable to them, right? Ways you can know your audience is to one, research your audience. So prepare for your presentation. Try to understand who will be in the room and their level of familiarity with the topic. Ask questions. if you have like a registration form or something like that for your presentation, ask questions on that registration form, or like pull your coworkers for certain things. Hey, I'm going to give this presentation on Friday. Can you all answer these 3 questions before Thursday so I can prepare for my presentation? So research your audience, try to get a level of familiarity with them. Ask yourself, is my audience experts? Are they beginners? Are they somewhere in between? And you can adjust your language accordingly based on their knowledge level. Use simple everyday language. So replace complex or technical words with just simpler, more commonly used words. Ways you can do this is actually identifying the jargon in your presentation. So after you write your presentation and create it, and create your notes, maybe you go through your presentation slides and notes and highlight any technical or complex terms, and then switch them out for simpler language, or at least make sure that you're explaining what they are. So try to replace them if you can, but if you can't, make sure to define that word or that acronym in simple terms. Make sure you're writing for clarity. When you're creating your slides or any kind of speaking notes, write in straightforward language, and focus on clarity and brevity rather than using fancy or complex words. And use common words where possible. Opt for simple words that conveys the same idea. So for example, instead of saying the word utilize, just say use, right? So I think that's a really great example. Instead of saying the word utilize, just say use. So use simple everyday language. The third one is to define terms if you have to use them. If you need to use a technical term that may be unfamiliar with someone, take a moment in your presentation and explain it briefly to the whole audience. That way you don't lose them. Also, you can introduce the technical terms and then explain them. So, for example, you could say something like, I'll be using the term algorithm, which simply refers to a set of instructions or steps used to solve a problem. And you would explain that prior to your presentation, like in your introduction. I know we give presentations for one of our autism projects, and we refer to autistic individuals or individuals with autism, and we give a disclaimer at the beginning of our any kind of presentation, and we say we will be referring to autistic individuals or individuals with autism both ways, and we will use them interchangeably. And so we kind of give that disclaimer. So doing something similar to that, where you say, like, I'm going to be using this technical term, here's what it means before I even get my presentation started. And you can also use analogies too. So comparing complex terms to more familiar everyday concepts can help your audience understand those more technical terms as well. So for example, you could say, explain a technical process, like if you're explaining like a data encryption or data sheet or something like that, you could explain it by saying locking up your private information in a safe only accessible with a key. So if you're talking about data encryption, you could say this is exactly like if you were to lock up all this information in a safe only accessible with a key, but instead you're going to use it on the key is on your computer, right? So using analogies can help explain those technical terms as well. Also, something I think is really smart is if you have a really high technical presentation, you can include a glossary, if necessary. So either I would provide it up front, so like sending it out to any of your audience members prior to the presentation. If your presentation absolutely requires like a high level of technical terms, maybe you create a glossary, send it out beforehand, and or like distribute it as a handout even. So that way your audience can refer to it during the presentation. Like just a one pager of like really big letters for your words and then what they mean, so they can quickly glance down as they're listening to you. They don't have to like step aside or step outside the room and Google what you're meaning or something like that. The fourth one is to practice empathy. So put yourself in the shoes of your listeners. If you were unfamiliar with a topic, would you be able to follow along if there was a bunch of jargon in the presentation? So practice explaining your ideas to someone outside of your field to identify where that language might be unclear. Something that I do before a presentation is I'll practice it in front of my husband. Like I said, he's a firefighter, so he has no idea what I'm talking about when I say WIOA and OJT and all the things. Like sometimes when I tell him, oh, we're working with ICCB today, or we're working with DCEO today, he's like, what? So try explaining your ideas to someone who's not in your field, like a family member or a friend or something, and then take those technical terms and that jargon and be able to explain it to them. Then you can explain it to your audience and make that really clear. Some strategies that you can actually do to do this is obviously, like I just said, explain or present your presentation to like a friend or family member or somebody outside of your field. Rehearse it out loud, video record yourself, and then just try to like use simple examples when you're talking about examples, and maybe try to like use real life examples. Like I've done that during this presentation, right? Like I've talked about real life examples in our center or real life examples with my husband. And so that allows like a level of accessibility to you, my audience, and just kind of helps to give the concepts to the audience that the audience can easily grasp those concepts because they are applicable to real life. You can also use analogies and examples from everyday life. We just talked about that. And avoiding acronyms and abbreviations is also important. I know Antonia is going to touch on that a little bit more. And we've talked about this, but always like spell them out. I know sometimes it's easy to just speak in WIOA acronyms, but if we can get in the habit of spelling them out, then our audience will understand those better. And then it just becomes a habit for you as you're talking, right? Obviously, just limiting technical terms altogether is best practice and keeping it concise. Sometimes jargon can kind of creep into our speech when we're trying to say too much or we're trying to be overly detailed. And if you just focus on the most important points of the content, you can avoid unnecessary complexity in your explanations, and that will also help you to avoid jargon. So some two ways that you can do this is draft your speech or your presentation beforehand, write out like a script or a rough outline, and focus on avoiding jargon as you're writing it. And then this will give you a clearer idea of what you want to say and helps you see kind of where that technical language is infiltrating into your presentation just because you're so used to it. And then afterwards, review that script for that jargon and then like switch it out for more simple words. And then always ask for feedback if you have the time, if it's possible, before presenting to a wider audience. If you can ask someone who isn't familiar with your subject to read your speech or listen to your speech. And then if they struggle to understand it, you can adjust your language accordingly. You can run a mock presentation. We talked about that a little bit with like a colleague or a friend or a family member. And also try to keep it conversational, try to keep your presentation conversational, and enter things in your presentation that are interactive. Like we've done some polling today. You guys are participating in the chat. Oh, thank you, Christine. Yeah, love the idea of a glossary as a handout. Yeah, I think that's a great idea too. But try to keep it conversational because when you're explaining the subject to someone without a background in the field, when you're keeping it as a conversation more so as like a presentation, then this can help keep your language to be more accessible. And then I just wanted to reiterate that if you're able to follow these strategies, you can avoid overloading your speech with jargon and make your ideas more accessible to a broader audience. So lastly, I just want to touch on maintaining your audience's attention. So two ways you can do this when you're trying to avoid jargon. The first one is ask questions. You can ask your audience rhetorical questions by like turning a normal sentence into a question. And then ask a question and answer it yourself in order to introduce the next topic. So I could have said, like previously, we were talking about strategies to avoid jargon. And then I can say, so how are we going to keep our audience's attention while we're avoiding jargon? Well, we're going to ask questions and become a storyteller. So see what I just did there? I asked a question to the audience, but I answered it myself in order to introduce my next topic using it as a transition. And then you can also ask a question to the audience directly. I've done that by using polls, asking you to type in the chat. We had an open text box. When we ask questions to our audience during a presentation, whether they're rhetorical or whether you're using it to transition to the next topic, or you actually want to know the answer to their, like you want to pull them really quickly. Like if I were to say, how many of you use jargon in your everyday life? And you all raised your hand, right? That would be an example of just me asking you a question that I actually want to know the answer to. Question marks are like hooks, right? They're literally shaped like a hook. And so I just am using questions to hook into my audience's brain to help maintain their attention. And then also, the second tactic or strategy that you can use to maintain your audience's attention is to become a storyteller. So I feel like in workforce, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of policy, we have a lot of technical information that we all need to know, right? As what comes with when you work with government agencies and bureaucracy and all the things. And so if you can become a storyteller, you're going to have a really powerful strategy to keep people's attention, but also to help them remember the details. So I use this example, for example, software. Like, let's say I'm giving a presentation on software, pretty boring, right? But if I can become a storyteller, then I can tell a story about how we came to have good software architecture, or how we didn't have good software version control at first, and now we do. So that's a story, right? So if you can tell a story with your information, then you're going to maintain your audience's attention, remember details, and also avoid jargon because you're no longer just blurting out a bunch of technical terminology. You're now telling a story with the topic that you're explaining on. So here's a format that you can use to tell a story. When you tell a story during your presentations, it's going to help make them more clear, more focused, and more memorable, which will help you avoid jargon in a nutshell. So you can use I challenge you to take any subject that you do a presentation on. I'm sure everybody on here has done a presentation at some point. Any subject that you've done a presentation on, and create a story out of it by asking and answering these 4 questions. So the first question is, what is the problem? So tell a story about how you encountered this problem or how this problem came about. How long have we had this problem? Why is it important to you to solve this problem? Or why is it important to the state to solve this problem? And then why is it important to the audience to solve this problem, right? Because if there's one thing that an audience wants to know is, why am I here? Why is it important that I listen to you? Why am I spending an hour and a half of my life with you, right? The second one is, what is the cause? So why did this problem occur? And then tell the story of how you got to the bottom of the problem. And then the third question is, what are the possible solutions? So tell us solution A, how it failed, and then how you tried solution B and it worked better. And then the fourth one, which I accidentally didn't put on this slide, so I apologize, is what was your chosen solution? So the fourth one and the third one can kind of go together, like just solutions. What are the possible solutions? And then what's the chosen solution? And that's a story. And then this whole format together actually tells a story. So you're telling a story of what the problem was, what the cause was, what are the possible solutions, and then what was the chosen solution to the problem. So that whole format also tells a story too. So if you can ask questions and tell stories during your presentation, you will be able to maintain your audience's attention and also avoid jargon for sure. And yeah. Any questions for me before I hand it off to Antonio about jargon, the meaning of language, how to avoid jargon in your presentations, strategies for avoiding it? Yes, Danny, hold on. Let me unmute you. Go ahead.
My only question was if we would have access to these slides because I want to use this for a different presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. So you will have access to the slides 48 business hours after today. So we'll get them uploaded by Friday morning. And then the recording as well.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I'm going to hand it off to Antonio just to talk about using plain language more in depthly and going over a plain language guide and just have him kind of touch on that.
Hey, everyone. First of all, really love the engagement today. I'm so excited to see how many people are responding in the chat and want to kind of keep that going. I want to tell you a little bit about myself because it introduces why I'm passionate about this subject. I come from a legal assistant background. So for me, when I first started working as a legal assistant, I was really terrified that I was going to have to learn Greek and Latin because we all know attorneys speaking Greek and Latin. And I was actually really, really happy to find that once I actually got there was a federal push that's been going on for honestly a couple of decades at this point to move away from all of that, to move away from language that requires a master's degree, language that is not English, and be able to make sure that legal documents were understandable for the general public. Does that mean that they're any less confusing? Absolutely not, but it's at least a push towards it. So, Kirsten, if you could go to the next slide, please. So what is plain language? Plain language is a federal initiative to make government documents a little bit more readable for the public. It's not just that, I mean, plain language is a concept in and of itself, but for all of us that work in these complex systems, it's something that's meant to be a lot more easily accessed by the general public, a lot more easy to understand. We want to move away from a society of having gatekeepers, of people who have to interpret the language for you, kind of like, I mean, the Catholic Church before Martin Luther, like that they would interpret the Bible and then the general public would have to trust a priest to be able to interpret the Bible correctly. We want to avoid that in government. We don't want to be those pre-Martin Luther priests who are digesting these things for other people. We want to make sure that from the top down, we are making things clear. And I also studied English. I love language. Anybody that knows me knows that I can fill up an inbox really, really easily. I like big words. I like somebody. I grew up in Mexico, so when I first started talking, I spoke in this like English Spanish thing where I was picking the biggest word that I could use. So I would use like instead of mop, which wasn't as much fun to say in English, I would say trapeador, which like now I have a horrible American accent, but as a kid, I could switch the two and just use the bigger word. So my whole life has been kind of me taking a moment to scale back how I talk, and being a lot more easy to understand by people and a lot more fun to listen to. So I'm very passionate about language. I think the thing that we need to keep in mind whenever we're talking to people is this term called register, which basically means just code switching. Whenever we talk to different people, register means the way that we switch the way that we talk when we're talking to different people. So I'm going to talk to a 9-year-old very, very differently than I'm going to talk to the governor, you know? So whatever it's not fake, it's not phony, it's not us putting on an act. We literally change our accent, we change the words that we use, we change our intonation, we change everything about ourselves when we're talking to different people. And really what that is us trying to connect to other people. So instead of us feeling like we're putting on an act and we're being pompous and weird or whatever, embrace the flexibility of who you are, if talking differently to different people. So, Kirsten, next slide, please. So what we really want to do is work towards minimizing misunderstandings. And what that takes, and Kirsten said this before, is a bit of empathy and thinking about what knowledge does this person come to the table with? How can I best connect with this person to get what I need to? Yeah, code switching is definitely a real thing for sure. I feel like in Chicago, I have a very different accent. I amp up the Mexicanness and then dial it down when I'm in like the middle of like Southern Illinois or whatever. Like it is like a slight change in like how I talk. And I don't mean to do it. I just do it. I can relax a little bit more in Chicago. You know, it's weird. But we want to move towards language, using language in the same way, not necessarily in all contexts, but we want to make sure that we're communicating. Like we're not just like I feel like as a legal assistant, a lot of what I would do, and the reason why I'm really good at filling an inbox is that my goal was to make sure that I was documenting things. Like I sent somebody this information with a timestamp and the date that I was doing it, and like to them, and I could later on reference be like, you were told this at this time, and that's not communicating. That is documenting. So we want to communicate. We want to make sure, and one of the biggest ways that we can do that in all of our lives, spoken and writing, is by using plain language. So on the previous slide, I forgot to talk about this, but does anybody know who Noam Chomsky is? If you do, I'm going to be like, we'll know that you have read some like linguistic theory. I didn't anticipate that. Noam Chomsky is a theorist who writes in the most convoluted, inaccessible way possible, almost famously so, to the point that probably like 15-ish years ago, maybe more at this point, honestly, some grad students made a bot making fun of him that's called the Chomsky bot that just spits out random information that has no meaning but sounds really fancy. Yes, absolutely. I can put it in there. It is not an easy spelling. Noam Chomsky. And the thing is called the Chomsky bot. So if you look up Chomsky bot, you'll be able to see it. I actually have a link to it in the slides. So once we send out the slides, you'll be able to see it. And it's really fun to it just auto generates a paragraph of nonsense. And that's really what we want to avoid. Like that's the reason why bureaucrats get made fun of. We want to make sure that we're not doing that. But it's been like the Chomsky bot has been around for a long time. We've known about this problem for a long time. It's something that we should really be working towards being better at. So next slide, please. So what we should be striving for in what plain language is that little gold star in the middle. Is something that is concise, something that's simple, something that is easy to understand. That's really the guidelines of what we're going for. And now next slide, please. Really what we're going to be going over is guidelines, which are honestly very, very similar to the last slide or the penultimate slide that Kirsten had. But just some general things to keep in mind when you're writing and when you're talking. But these especially have to do with writing. I've also, and I'll put this in the chat later on, made a little guide for you guys that has all of these guidelines that you can use as a checklist as you're getting these drilled into your brain. So the next one. The first thing is write for your reader. It's not a matter of dumbing stuff down. Nobody wants to, people can sense when they're being patronized. You know, have you ever felt like you were in a conversation where you're being patronized? Can we give some examples? Like when's a time when you went somewhere and you just walked away feeling insulted? Close. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same. Boss telling you can do something as a form of pet. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. We've all had conversations where we walked away feeling like they didn't think all that much of us. And that's really what we want to avoid. Plain language isn't baby talking to somebody, you know? We all have, Kirsten said, I was ordering a carpet and they spoke to me like I didn't know anything about measuring for carpet. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I had the same experiences at Lowe's. Um, we can all tell when we're being spoken down to. And we all, especially in this field of work, have really complex things that we're trying to get across. And really, the art of it all is making sure that we can communicate really, really complex ideas in a very digestible way. So think about your reader. In what circumstances are they receiving this information? Like, how are they coming across what you're trying to tell them? How much time do they have on their hands when you're coming across that information? What's their technological capacity? If you're putting this on like a website, how easy is it to use? How many clicks does it take to get to the information that you need? How many clicks does it take to unfurl all the information that you have? How, like, we want to be able to use the full breadth of technology, but we don't want to do that at the expense of losing people, you know? What prior knowledge does your reader have? And how much time do you think that they have? Like, it's very important to think about making sure that you give only the information that you can deliver in a clear and concise way in the time that you're allotted. All right, next slide, please. The next important thing is to write for everybody. Be considerate of people with disabilities when you're writing stuff. I know that there are, I gave a whole presentation on this, and I've actually got it linked here. It was like an hour and 15 presentation on accessible presentations. And an hour and 15 minutes of listening to somebody give you suggestions is a lot. That's a lot of information to digest. I really, the big thing to keep in mind is thinking about how is somebody with a screen reader going to be able to understand your presentation? So using kind of the built-in structure, and just really being like conscientious of if somebody isn't able to see your presentation, are they still going to be able to participate? If somebody can't hear your presentation, are they still going to be able to participate? If somebody, again, is using a screen reader, are they going to be able to follow, or is it going to jumble up? Or did you put a really big hyperlink that then that screen reader is going to have to like read, you know? So be considerate with people with disabilities. Choose your words. Do some research of what I think is the best terminology. The thing about language, though, is that language is going to change. So really do your best. Like, it's not a matter of being perfect all the time. It's the matter of you putting in the effort of doing a little bit of research to use what you think is the best at the time. Obviously, in 5 years, we all know how things go and things change, and that's fine. That's what language is meant for. Language is meant to be changing. And less is more. In language, in design, in everything, less is more. Like, really, like, keep it absolutely simple. Try to think of Marie Kondo, of like, put it to your heart, and is this necessary? Not throw it away. All the graphics and crazy, like everything technology, like, we're not showing off here. We're just trying to communicate. Again, we want to communicate. That is always the target. If what we're putting in, the bells and whistles and icons and pictures and all that, is distracting from what we're saying, don't use it. Next slide, please. Some general tips, though, about accessibility, and then I'm just going to put a link to the other webinar if you want to watch it. Send all the participants all materials ahead of time if possible. Use the built-in structure, again, of like heading, body, bullet points, all that kind of stuff, so that a screen reader can really follow what you're saying. Rename all hyperlinks. If you don't know how to do that, you right-click on whatever word that you're wanting to do, right? Or like, if you pasted a hyperlink, you right-click on it, and then there should be an option that either says hyperlink or edit hyperlink. Go to edit hyperlink, and then there's a little spot at the very top that says rename, and you can just put in what you want to actually appear as far as the text. That way you don't get this huge, long hyperlink in the middle of a body of text that then a screen reader has to just jumble through. Use a simple, large font. Generally, we say about 24 points for slides, about 12 points for documents. Choose your colors thoughtfully. It's kind of difficult to keep in mind what all colors are helpful for people with color blindness. But a really easy way to think about that is, can somebody who's looking at your document understand the document without any use of color? Can somebody follow it without? Have you found other ways that you can convey your information that isn't color? So you don't have to memorize what colors affect people, but the most important one is use the accessibility checker, and comes by default with all documents. Here is the link to my accessibility training. I'm not going to belabor that point, but there's like an hour and 15 of suggestions there. And if you want to just go through the slides, again, the slides on the Illinois Workforce Academy. Next slide, please. All right, again, be conscious of people's time. Put the major points first, the details last. Make sure that people can walk away within a couple of minutes of understanding the main points of what you're trying to say. And you can do that using an abstract. You can use a table of contents so people can go directly to where they need to go. You can also use graphics to highlight key phrases. I don't know if you've ever seen in a magazine where they have like those big text boxes of the big points so that if you're just flipping through the magazine, you can see what the celebrity said that's the most controversial. So think like a graphic designer, like try to make things easy to understand. The next slide is really simple. Eliminate filler. Less is more. It's always the case. That's really all that I'm going to say about that. We can move on to the next slide. So a quick tip when you're trying to prioritize what you're trying to say as an English major is this an opinion piece? Is this something that people are coming to see my take on this? If it is an opinion piece, then you can keep all the adjectives and all the opinions that you have in it. If it's not an opinion piece, honestly, you can just delete most of the adjectives. Adjectives are mostly there to put your spin on whatever information you're giving. And so unless it is a piece where your intent is to give your opinion about something, just delete the adjectives, and that'll save you a little bit of space. Next slide, please. Minimize abbreviations. We've talked about this a lot, but if you find yourself using an abbreviation, you better spell it out the first time. If there's a different word that you can use for it, definitely use that word. So we've already gone over that. I'm going to move on to the next slide, please. Again, we all have words that mean a different thing. And we already went through this, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about it. But like, again, a belt could be geography, like a landmass, or it could be the garment that you wear, or it can be in music, somebody singing really, really loud. So if there's a word that has a definition that other people will associate with it, but in your field means something else, go with the definition that most people will understand. If unavoidable, or at some points, like the last 2 points ago, that is write as concisely as possible. Sometimes if you try to explain something, or if you try to like repeat the same phrase without using the word that you're looking for, you're going to make a really long document. So go ahead and use the jargon, but make sure that you explain it very clearly at the beginning of the document. All right, next slide, please. Again, avoid legal, foreign, or technical jargon. Is there an English term for what you're trying to say? Is there also a simple English term? Something that people are going to know off the bat without any prior knowledge what you're talking about. Is there a way to make, if it would make your document, again, obnoxiously long, go ahead and use the jargon, but make sure that you explain it first. All right, next slide. Can you say it with a picture? If you can break the information out into a table, go ahead and do it. I mean, even in formal government documents, we are moving away from text boxes that are just like long series of text. Try to think about ways that you can break up the text with a table or a picture. If you use a picture, make sure that it's relevant to what you're saying, that it adds to it. But yeah, can you say it with a picture? Can you say it with a table? Can you say it with smart art on PowerPoint? Next slide, please. Oh, Danny asked a question of lack of understanding. Maybe it's my lack of understanding, but why does a lot of legal terms come from other countries' language, like pro se? A lot of it is because we had built the legal system to be sort of gatekeepers. We wanted things to be inaccessible because like money, honestly. You don't pay a lawyer if you can understand the legal document. You understand? Like that if so we're trying to move away from that. Unfortunately, the like systems are so complex that that's not really a possibility. I think lawyers will always have a job, but it was a way of showing that you were educated. Back when Latin was an important thing to learn in school, it showed that you came from a certain background. It really was a way to signal to people that you were fancy. So yeah, it quite literally was a way to be a gatekeeper, which is why we're moving away from Latin, because we don't teach Latin in school anymore. Because why would you do that when we have perfectly good English terms? All right. Use short paragraphs with many headers. Again, same thing as the table. If you can break up information, go ahead and break it up. Make it easy to navigate. Make it visually interesting. If we could go to the next slide. And the final thing, and Kirsten already said this, have a proofreader. I also use my husband frequently. I've found myself explaining things to him on a napkin at a Panera with like charts of what I'm talking about so that he can get the hot gossip of what I'm trying to actually say. So have a proofreader, have somebody preferably who has no idea what you're talking about. The second best would be a coworker, but really the idea is to deliver complex information in a way that literally everybody would be able to understand it. Because again, we don't want to be a gatekeeper. We want people to understand what we're trying to say, because a lot of what we have is the term that everybody uses in this world is the best kept secret. We're the best kept secret, and we don't want to be the best kept secret. We want all of this programming and aid and wraparound support and the American Job Centers and all that kind of stuff to be something that people are able to access. We don't want to not have customers. All right, next slide, please. Basically just that I'm going to drop the plain language quick guide into the chat. So let me go ahead and do that real quick, and then we can move on. But we'll also have this up on the website for you guys to see. All right, and just let me know if you can't open that. But I put a couple of resources together for you guys. Another really good resource for accessibility is the Do It website. I'm going to put it in the chat. But they have really comprehensive documents on how to make your documents and your presentations accessible. Fantastic resource. I use them so much when I was going through my accessibility presentation. All right. Do we have any final questions?
Thanks, Antonio. Yeah, if there's any final questions for me or Antonio about any of the content today, we welcome them. You can feel free to raise your Zoom hand, or you can type in the chat. Or if you just want to like share a story or an example or a comment, we welcome that too. Thanks, Danny.
I thought it was helpful.
All right, just a couple of housekeeping items. So this was recorded. We will have that up on our Illinois Workforce Academy website within 48 business hours. There'll be a follow-up email tomorrow that you will receive in your email from Zoom, actually, and it will have that direct URL in it. So you don't even have to go search on our website. It's going to have the direct URL. And then it will also be on Illinois WorkNet too. They also post all of our Workforce Wednesday webinars on their website. So you can find it there as well if you prefer to use Illinois WorkNet. And we will also have the plain language resource guide that Antonio touched on, and all of the resources, the presentation slides, the recording, everything will be housed there. So kind of a one-stop shop. Also in the follow-ups email tomorrow, there will be a follow-up survey. It's only 5 questions, so we would greatly appreciate if you take that. We do look at that follow-up survey on the WEOF-PD committee. Quarterly, we compile all of them and we use them to help us kind of gauge whether we're actually providing quality professional development to the system, as well as planning for future professional development. So there's a question on there of if you have a topic that you would like to have a professional development session on, we welcome that topic, and we would love to be able to explore finding presenters and creating a quality PD session for that topic. So if you're like me, and I really just wish I someone would do a professional development session on X, then go ahead and take that survey and fill that out, and we will get to planning it. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. Again, if you want to reach out to Antonio or I'll put my email in the chat. Antonio, if you want to do the same, feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, of course, Dana. Glad you could join us today. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. And I'll go ahead and close this out.
Have a wonderful day.